This is the one to watch. This will have major implications.
Dozens of protests erupted on university campuses and in cities across China on Saturday in an unprecedented show of defiance and anger against the government's restrictive zero-COVID policy.
There are 3 rising storms in China, and the fact that they're all 3 happening at once is going to make it a lot worse. And yes, it is going to affect you here in America directly. I'll show you exactly how. I'm going to show you some statistics and information about all of this. I'm also going to say one thing really quickly about the FTX debacle, and then we're going to get into all of these factors of the 3 rising storms in China that you need to know about. Just to give you a quick teaser, they've got plenty of civil unrest that you're seeing on the news now that you know all about. And at the same time, their zero COVID policy is going to make the results of COVID backfire in such a meaningful and significant and deteriorous way. And this is all under the guise of something that most people don't realize, is that the Chinese economy is slowing down pretty significantly. And that's true even before you have all these lockdowns now going on all across the nation. And all of this is underneath the umbrella of the gradually slowing, in terms of how much it's growing, the Chinese economy, the number of people, the population is starting to round the corner. It's going to be declining. Here you can see the population of China, and it's hard to tell from the chart, but it is rounding off there at the top, slowing down. And I'll show you more granular details in 1 second. But you can see from the yearly population growth rate of China, since about 1970, it has been on decline, except for one bulge there around 1990. But since then, it's been coming down lower, and it's actually very close to the zero bound, and that's when it's neutral population growth, and then it will continue to trend lower towards negative. The demographics of China are going to enhance that decline even more. So all of this is leading right as they go off this demographic cliff. This video is sponsored by all the supporters of the Peter Leeds Army. Please visit peterleeds.com/army to help support what we're doing here. So here's a quick comment I want to make about the FTX debacle, and then we'll get into all the good stuff about China. Nothing we say is intended as personalized trading advice for you. What I said is that this is going to take years for this to clean up and absorb through the economy. BlockFi was under trouble. Now they've declared bankruptcy. And from CNN, the latest in a series of crypto bankruptcies following FTX, Voyager and Celsius. And that's one of the things that's worse than if you invest in something and it doesn't perform like you expected and you lose a bit of money. That's horrible. But even worse than that is if you lose your money when you get scammed or tricked or taken advantage of. And one thing that I say a lot of the time, and I want to make sure that you guys understand, I'm not trying to kick someone when they're down. I feel horrible for anyone who lost money in cryptocurrencies because you're just trying to get a leg up. You're trying to do what you can to better your position. You use the best knowledge that you can find to make your decision. And a lot of the times you do your due diligence and you make a good decision. And then you have something like the FTX debacle where that money is just gone. And I don't think that most people will recover any of that money. Even the primary creditors aren't going to get their money back. So if you're down that list a little bit, you're not going to see penny one, in my opinion. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I want to encourage you to not give up and to keep at it. And I believe in your ability, especially with all the technology you have now, to invest well, to learn how to invest well, to start a business, whatever you want to do. Don't be shy about it now that this has happened. If you lose a few dollars, don't say, well, I'm not going to invest anymore. There's a lot of opportunities for you, even in the face of everything that's going wrong with cryptocurrencies. Just take a look here. This is what happens with the zero COVID policy. And their hopes were that the zero COVID policy would keep this line near zero endlessly. But you can see the cases rising here on this chart. You can see the cases rising here on this count. And what's going to happen next? They'll either have to get more draconian with their zero COVID lockdowns, or the illness will take over. And if they do get more draconian with their lockdowns, that will only delay the inevitable. China will need to go through the same first wave of coronavirus that every other country went through. It's unavoidable, in my opinion. So you've got three rising storms in China all happening at once. You've got the civil unrest, and I'm going to bring in some other coverage of it that I can comment on to give you a little bit more color to the situation. Pay attention to this next part where they say that people are actually making statements or calling directly against the Communist Party. You can go to jail for that, and people are doing it anyways. This represents a social turning of the tide that either gets quashed or it represents significant change that's going to have a lot of ramifications from it.
Many shouted for leader Xi Jinping and the Communist Party to step down. A deadly fire at an apartment building in the far western region of Xinjiang appears to be fueling the most recent anger as video emerged, which appeared to show lockdown measures delayed firefighters from reaching the victims.
And what I've told you before is the zero COVID policy is going to backfire because China, for all intents and purposes, has not experienced the waves of coronavirus that every other country in the world has gone through. So you don't have that herd immunity. You don't have the adaptation to the virus as it sweeps through. Now they're going through it for the first time. And what I said as well is you can do zero COVID policy till you're blue in the face. It's still not going to stop the virus from eventually running rampant through the whole country. Think of it this way. What if in America we said we have a zero flu policy? Zero flu policy. Somebody has a flu, we shut down the whole city. That wouldn't stop the flu. It would delay the flu. And what I tell you is that whenever you delay something artificially, it just comes back worse. Like when they say things like landlords can't evict people. Great for the people who don't get evicted. I understand that. I understand why they did it. But I'm saying eventually the date comes where that policy expires and there's just a huge wave of evictions. Anything that's artificial is temporary. I always tell you that. You need to know that. They've artificially held down coronavirus in China, the birthplace of coronavirus, and now it's catching up with them, and you're seeing the civil unrest in response to the brutal lockdowns, which when I see things like this, it makes me feel so grateful to live in North America. We have a lot more freedom than a lot of countries in the world, and I just see this and I don't overlook it. I just feel gratitude that we have a better situation here. Here's the historical population of China. Now, watch this, okay? 1955, their growth rate was 2%. Now, watch this closely. See if you notice anything different as we go forward every 5 years. Starting at 2%, you'll see 1.47%, 1.07%, and then as of the year 2000, it dropped below 1% growth rate, and it's been below 1% since then, with only signs of a further acceleration of the decline. In 2020, it was at 0.39%. Expect that to eventually become a negative. But this virgin coronavirus situation is going to lead to higher prices for things for you on the shelf. It's going to make more production delays. It's going to make more shipping delays and backlogs. And what does that lead to? You know, it leads to inflation in certain products. Limited supply of goods, a lot of money chasing them, you're paying more for stuff. If you can acquire the things at all. I do know that inflation will keep coming down. It's already coming down. It will come down even more going forward. This, as I said ages ago when I first told you that inflation would come down, that this will be a wind forcing or fueling inflation. The more of the port backlogs you see, you're going to have more pressures pushing inflation higher. That will always be pushing against what the natural tendency is for inflation to come down, which is going to continue to do even in the face of everything that's going on with China. And besides the Chinese population sort of maxing out right now, this is about as big as it will get. Go forward a year, 2 years, 3 years, the population of China will be less than it is today. But everything that's going on right now with the civil unrest in China, that will actually probably delay any plans to make a move on Taiwan. They have to clean up their own backyard first before they go knocking on Taiwan's door. And these protests will only get more extreme if coronavirus does start to run rampant. Latest numbers show that coronavirus in the very recent weeks is coming down a bit, but I'm going to show you on the chart exactly what we're looking at, and you'll see exactly what the effect of the zero COVID policy was. In China, that has enjoyed double-digit economic growth for so long is now slowing down markedly. And I'll show you the exact numbers in this video. So lastly, I want to say, if you don't think that the things going on in China are meaningful, they're absolutely going to affect you directly. They're going to affect the entire world directly. A lot of this is more significant than a lot of the stuff that you may be seeing on the news. This is the one to watch. This will have major implications.
Now, in an op-ed published Sunday morning, Chinese state media calls the current COVID measures, quote, scientifically effective, saying the public should have full confidence in them.
Now, I think it's important to understand that even if the government believes what they're saying, whether or not the COVID measures are effective or not, scientifically effective, they're going to say that. It's important to know that every government does this, whether it's working or not, whether they believe it or not. They say everything's okay, we've got it under control, this is the right thing to do, this is good for you. They have to do that. It's important to know that any kind of statement like that is absolutely meaningless.
In terms of how increasingly ineffective, unscientific, and not to mention potentially dangerous this zero COVID policy has become. And also, of course, all the absurdities surrounding its enforcement. That's why we have seen people across this country really trying to take the matter into their own hands.
A lot of innocent people who just want to have their voice heard will be in jail. There's people from Hong Kong that were put in jail that are still in jail to this day, and nobody talks about it anymore.
Not only you see people in Xinjiang taking to the streets demanding their freedom, clashing with security forces, but also even here in Beijing, for example, residents are seeing tearing down metal barriers or fences set up by local officials to seal them off in their residences.
And I want you to pay attention to one part. He says that I found it very interesting. A lot of the students in the universities have only known this situation where there's all these COVID lockdowns, a zero COVID policy, and the effects of that. That's all they've ever known.
But all of that really culminating Saturday night into Sunday morning with multiple vigils and protests, often spearheaded by young people on university campuses. You know, they are seen holding up white paper, white obviously being the color of mourning, not only for the victims of Xinjiang, but also trying to, they seem to trying to indicate there is so much anger and frustration pent up inside themselves, but they were not allowed to express them. Because remember, for a lot of these university students, their entire college life has been under some form of a lockdown. Kim.
And a lot of people are rising up now, even though there's a lot of risk of their protests being quashed, being arrested, put in jail for years, and they're still taking their risks. That's meaningful. Things are shifting in China, and now it's going to be a battle between the Communist Party and the voice of the people, or lack thereof. The Communist Party will continue to try and quash the voices of the protesters. And this will play out widely in front of the eyes of the world. The fact that a lot of protesters are targeting the Communist Party for their anger, that's significant. That represents a major shift in the minds of the people on the ground in China. And here are population forecasts. What that is simply showing you is that they paid a bunch of politicians and analysts to make guesses about what the population is going to do and then to back up their guess. That's all that is. Whether in China or any country otherwise, it's just a waste of money and time, in my opinion. And this next part looks more like a science fiction movie than reality. All the police in the hazmat suits running out and stopping the crowd. I've seen this sort of thing happen in science fiction movies, but never in real life until now.
Local officials, but those protesters in Shanghai really directly challenging the legitimacy of the Communist Party and its leader. That, as you know, is something simply not tolerated here. So that's why there's a lot of concern and worry about the protesters. Some of them have been taken away by police. We understand that's why a crowd has again gathered up in Shanghai on the same location demanding their release. So I think there is a lot of concern there, but not to mention, of course, from the government's perspective, there was also a lot of fear that this kind of chanting and protest could inspire others across this country.
This is a list of Chinese cities which are either larger or more populated than the city that you are in right now. And this list went on and on. I just stopped at the one screenshot. It goes on and on down to about 30 cities, even more. And those cities are still more populated than most cities that most of us live in. Here are the cases of coronavirus in China, and you have to kind of take all of the information you get from China with a grain of salt. This channel is all about helping you make the right moves and understand what to do during this whole economic weakness that we're facing right now and all the problems with the economy.